Introducing the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya live stream and live chat. Do you have a question from any of the following areas? Land survey, valuation, building survey, land administration, engineering survey, estate agency, property management, and geospatial information management. Join the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya live stream and live chat every Friday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Welcome members this Friday afternoon to the Institution of Surveyors Facebook live chats. Your host today is Cyrus M. Mukeda. I'm a licensed surveyor as well as a registered fiscal planner, and I worked on this area of riparian reserve for quite a while. My study was about conservation of riparian reserves in the Nairobi River Basin, but I've also, in more than 26 years, worked on the areas of riparian, the whole of this country, and therefore is a kind of an area of interest for me, and I'm very passionate about riparian areas. So today's topic is on riparian lands management in Kenya, and I'm going to give you an overview. It's a very broad topic, and therefore I'll give you an overview, and therefore I will request you to share with us, share with us comments about the topic. So let's start with the background to the issue of riparian reserve management. So, of course, people wonder what is a riparian land. The riparian land has evolved since the Latin ripa, which means water, associated with water. So from ripa came the riparian, which is land. So there are so many concepts that I've emerged that explain that concept of riparian. One is the riparian reserve, which is very common in Kenya. Reserve means an area that is dedicated only for that purpose. However, because of the nature, of course, the human aspect, the environmental aspect, it's very difficult to have land that is not occupied, and therefore other thoughts have come about conservation, about management, using without interfering with them or their ecological existence. So the reserve is not so common nowadays, but other terms include the concept riparian zones. They are seen as a zone of interest because they are interfaces between terrestrial as well as aquatic systems, ecosystems. So some call them zones because the same way we have an urban zone, the same way we have the rural zones, then those who advocate, like myself, who seriously advocate for riparian areas, talk about riparian zones. Then we also have riparian lands. When it's seen from the perspective of land use, then you have it as a riparian land. So that's the term that we shall use today. Others call it riparian buffer because it's a buffer between the water systems and the terrestrial systems. Others call them riparian forests because they are expected to have certain vegetation associated with the river, so they are seen as riparian forest. Then we also have other terms like vegetation, riparian vegetation. So there are many concepts, but for today, let's use the concept riparian land. So that area, that interface area is a critical component of a healthy water system or aquatic system. It could be a river, it could be a sea, it could be ocean. And not only the water ecosystem, but also the human environment. The human environment in generations, even along the Nile, along the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers, along the Indus River in India, the Yellow River in China, have all existed next to the river for transportation, for the agricultural needs, for their water needs. So whether navigation, whether you're talking of human settlements, have always thrived next to water. So that's a very critical element in human life. However, the process, especially urbanization and rural activities like deforestation, those activities have affected these interfaces, which we are calling riparian land. And as a result of clearing of the natural vegetation cover or modification in such a way that reduce their health and vitality, then they affect both the water as well as the river system. So, of course, there are importances of the river. When we look at the river from the upper reaches, where we have the first order rivers, those small rivers in, let's say, the Nairobi River system, the small rivers in Kikuyu, small rivers in Dagoretti, those rivers are very critical. They are the most active rivers because the canopy, the tree canopies cover they cover the river from sunshine, where there is hot light, which makes evaporation, which destroys the aquatic life. So, because of the trees, this is an overview. Because of the trees, we find some microorganisms that are called shirendas. The shirendas, they shirend the reefs. The reefs, of course, find predators. Predators kind of use that. Then they have collectors that transport those shirended reefs, and then the grazers, the big animals, the hippos in the water, are the mature stages of the river. You'll find now the 8th order or the mature stage. Of course, that's complete the food chain as well as the food web. So if you destroy the vegetation, that continuum, the vegetation continuum, once it is destroyed, then the rivers become stormwater drains, and therefore these animals die. And then, of course, it affects the food chain and the food web that we all depend on. So in terms of the role of riparian, of course, that primary vegetation, protecting the river banks from erosion, because they, of course, the root system bind the soil next to the bank and then protect that. Then trapping those sediments and then promoting water absorption and the storage. So many, even groundwater reserves, you find the riparian vegetation promotes all that. And so there are various factors that help that. This includes the land use factors. The nature and the type of land use is very important. The land tenure, land use densities, all affects the river. We also see the policy, the laws, as well as the institutional factors. Of course, we have the role and perceptions of various stakeholders that affect the way we perceive this area called riparian. And remember, a river without the riparian is like a person that walks naked. It's the riparian that removes the nakedness of a river. When you remove the riparian and you put on structures, put on farming that are not conducive to that, that vegetation that is not associative to the river, then what happens is that the river becomes dysfunctional, and therefore many other factors, including sedimentation, happen. If you want to know that, a very simple experiment, check the water in the forest. It's very clear. Once we come through farmlands, we find very brown water. The other experiments, the biophysical characteristics, including the slopes and the soils, also affects that river. If the slopes are too much, then more speeds, more velocities, then more erosion. So the vegetation, starting the grass, the shrubs, and the trees, help the river or protect the river from erosion. Simple experiments: you have a slope, which is plain, you pour water, the water takes the shortest time to go down. If you put grass on that slope, the same slope, it will take more time. And therefore, infiltration is what helps the groundwater recharge. It's what helps reduces flooding. It's what increases the value of that river system. So there are several definitions. As I mentioned, those are in terms of their names, but a lot of work has been done in Europe, in the United States, in Malaysia. Maybe in another presentation we shall present their determination methods and all that. But in terms of the United States Department of Agriculture, the riparian areas are lands that occur along watercourses and water bodies. They are distinctively different from surrounding lands. In fact, you can ask yourself, if I move that vegetation elsewhere, will it become riparian vegetation? The answer is no, because the vegetation must be associated with the riparian. There is a vegetation, the mangrove, let's say at the coast, that helps even desalinate the seawater. In fact, you can even drink the water. So it's very useful. There are several uses. In terms of environmentalists and those who do conservation, they see that a terrain that is next to the rivers and the streams, which is subject to periodic or occasional flooding. So it is washed, it's wetted area. Sometimes such area you not see vegetation, and you start seeing vegetation after the flooding area. So again, if you clear the vegetation, which should be after the flooding area, then all the erosive forces will affect the river system. So in terms of the Kenyan laws and policies, the Constitution of 2010 has not left out the definition. It has indicated that that land is public land, and therefore it should not be allocated to private users. So it's considered as a public land under Article 67 of the Constitution. Article 62 looks at it and then notes that all rivers, all lakes, and all land between high and low water marks are public land. And we shall see later the challenge of determining that high water mark without mapping, without contouring, determining the hydrological cycle of the river, the 100-year period, that's the highest mark. There is no way even the Survey Acts can be used to determine the riparian. So in a nutshell, there are several laws that stipulate various standards for riparian. The Water Act 2002, the Agriculture Acts, the Water Resources Management Rules of 2007, as well as the MCA Rules of 2006, and even Land Acts of 2012, Part 1, Clause 2G, page 13, also has determined that. So the Survey Act, of course, is a primary act of this discussion this afternoon. So we also have the new Physical and the Land Use Planning Act, and we also have the Physical Planning Rule number 15 of 1998, which gives the riparian land as 10 meters from any defined floodplain. So the question about laws, most laws that exist and the policies, they offer contradictory standards for riparian width. For instance, the Agriculture Act provides 2 meters from the bank. This was designed for agricultural purposes. Of course, the Agricultural Act talks also of slopes of not more than that 5%. Then we have the MCA Act, which gives from 6 meters minimum to 30 meters, similar to the NEMA, similar to the Water Resource Management Act, as well as the Physical Planning Rules, which are also contradictory. They are 10 meters from established floodplains. These are disjointed rules. They are disjointed laws and disjointed policies that are geared towards different focus. The Water Act is trying to protect the water resource. Yeah, the Oroma Act is trying to look at also the resource from interference. But when you look at the American situation, the American determination, how can 6 meter protect the river against pollution? How can that meter ensure proper wildlife habitat, especially the big rivers where we have big mammals? That 300 meter is what we find the Tana down there. And so the hippos cannot depend on the 30 meters. So the Kenyan rules and laws, they have not looked at the function, the criteria for determination. The function establishes why you should establish that 6 meters. If, for instance, the land use is so bad in terms of sewer, doesn't have sewer, doesn't have solid waste management system, then 6 meter will not protect. The Survey Act, on the other hand, well, that looks the most interesting in terms of conservation, does not say how does one determine the riparian of a river which is not a fixed width. It starts from a narrow river, and as it collects more tributaries along its journey, it becomes wider and wider. So you cannot talk of that meters when you're having a variable wind. Look at the Tana down there. Look at the river down there, at the coast. It's so wide. It has collected all the drainage that's in that drainage system. So the Survey Act, again, is not competent. Unless we have this longitudinal system, which is varying, require determinations from zone A to zone B. At least we know that is data meters. The 300 meter cannot depend on data meter. Neither the 3 meter upstream can depend on data meter. So the key element is the biophysical characteristics of the river. Some are V-shaped upstream, others are U-shaped. So the Survey Act means a lot of attempts in terms of conservation. Section 111 on tidal rivers sets a data meter or not tidal river. But however, unlike the other small rivers, you will find on it the Tana River that is having tidal aspect of the Kipini, the Athi River, maybe Nzoia, maybe some of those big rivers. But majority of the rivers don't have tidal. So that section 111 does not qualify. Again, even if it's data meters for tidal rivers, what about the 300 meters? We will still apply data meters at the coasts, or the 200 meters down there. So most rivers are not tidal. Then section 114 of the Survey Act deals with the swamp boundaries. For small swamps, it's a give and take lines, straight lines that ignores totally that wetland. In the sense, the wetland is not a wetland unless it has a riparian. The riparian is that terrestrial area, that's land that is in association with the swamp. So again, the Survey Act lacks the conservation ethics that would protect that swamp, even if you come up with a median line. Of course, beyond 150 meters under subsection 3, then you need to take straight line or lines that are defining that swamp. But again, what you can see is that swamp without its riparian, and riparian is that land that would protect the swamp from other land uses. So the methods of determination, there are two ways of determining the riparian winds. One is the fixed wind model. The fixed wind model are the ones that are common in Kenya, but they are not effective at all. If I say 6 meter wind from the bank, and this bank is variable, it means at Kikuyu when the river is 3, I do 6 meters. I come to Nairobi where it's 15 meter wind, I do still 6 meters. And there is this practice of always depending on the minimum. Rarely will you find planners, surveyors using the upper limits of that meters. And so it's not very useful in terms of that. The other model is the variable width. This is the most useful in terms of sustainability, because the variable width will look at the biophysical factors like soil slopes and even the floodplains. If there's a floodplain, you widen that zone. If it's a V shape, it can become narrow. The other consideration is the vegetation type. Then of course, the adjacent land uses. For those who are familiar with the Nairobi River, the University of Nairobi, you find this proper conservation. The Moi Forces, as an educational institution, you find proper conservation. But when you start seeing a Komba is an informal business or informal activity, you find them always next to the river. They make total use of that. So the type of land use that is planned next to the river is very important. So when you have public purpose land use, that's the best land use. When you have private, and especially the high density apartment, flats, you see. And the problem is not about the poverty only. You thought you find poverty in informal settlement. In fact, from a previous study, over 70% in some of the informal settlements are not owned by the tenants. They are owned by landlords. Some are very, very influential. Again, when you go to Lavington, you go to Radeshwa, you find, even from Yangogo Heart, you find buildings within even the 6 meters, not even that meters. So the problem of different winds leading, of course, for the same river, Nairobi River, you have a planner at Globe Cinema has put 15-meter winds. Even in the practice itself, you find another one has put 6 meters upstream. So this has led to confusion, because those who use the riparian for public purpose, let's say you want to do water pipelines, you want to do drainage from there, you cannot do because some properties come to the center of the river. So the variable ones are sustainable because they take care of the local conditions, the local factors. The local factors, if you are the Tsavo, the local factor is the wild animals. So you need to have very wide riparian. Now the question is, when you convert from one use to another, let's say you are on a ranch, a private ranch, and the riparian was not necessary because it's continuously vegetation, or let's say the arboretum, you don't need a riparian because total vegetation to the riverbank. Now, when you convert that private ranch into, let's say, residential, then it's high time you need even 30 meters or beyond, depending on the biophysical factors, on the land use that you are proposing. So it's a dynamic area. We don't need to have a fixed wind. So some of the challenges that we have encountered, or that are encountered in Kenya in terms of management, the major challenge is encroachment. If you do mapping of Nairobi rivers alone, you find construction of structures on the river channel, so many of them, Ngong River, Nairobi River, and the other 7 rivers, Gitaduru and all those others. Then as a result of construction, you have removal of vegetation cover. When you remove the vegetation cover, what you have done, you have made the river a stormwater drain. And the stormwater drain cannot sustain the aquatic life, and of course the aquatic life is what feeds us in terms of the fish. So it also affects us as human beings. So the vegetation is removed and substituted with construction of building structures. Then siting of unsustainable activities on the zone. We have seen car washes, we have seen garages, we have seen dumping of wastes, construction waste, even quarrying. When they are being done, when they are done next to the river, they are filled with very, very dangerous waste that affect the water quality and other aspects. The next is the degradation, where we have pollution by soil and liquid waste, removal of vegetation again, through degradation. When you dump solid waste, then the vegetation cannot thrive. Then the other challenge I mentioned earlier is the conflicting laws and policies, and as well as lack of clear guidelines. Then when you look at the Land Act of 2012, that clause 2G, you will find it says in accordance, land next or adjacent to water bodies, water courses, rivers, dams, and whatever. But it goes on to say the determination should be in accordance to the Survey Acts. And I've mentioned some of the challenges of the Survey Act. And then it also mentions further, as well as other acts. The other acts are quite contradictory. So even despite the review or the repeal of the Constitution, you still see again the new acts having contradiction. We hope the new rules will address the problem. That the definition must be a function of the local condition, a function of mapping, because mapping will determine the high water mark. That mapping will determine the flood areas. Mapping will determine the size of the river. So unless that is done, then any policy must always be generic. It will not give us solutions. The other challenge is the perception. Like the Mokoro area, they see that area as free or idle land. There's nothing done there, and so it's perceived as free or idle land. And you recall the Michoke efforts through the Nairobi River Basin program. When they planted trees, then of course it provided work for the young people. They were managing it. Another example is the Dandora. It's a small case study in Dandora where they are trying to protect that riparian area, and then they do their work beyond it. So the problem is the perception. Others see it as their private land. This is as a result of land administration processes. Their own land was up to the center line of the river, and then subsequent land administrative processes, including subdivisions, would then eventually produce a plot on the upper side near the road and a plot on the lower side near the river. And the one on the river, because the area is not adequate and the area is talking about the part of the riparian being part of this private land, they end up building there. And that's some of the buildings that were being demolished in recent times. And so others end up misusing it, they dump waste and degrading it. So mapping is very crucial, and the geological surveys are very crucial to the establishment of the actual riparian, so that we have, because of the nature of the river, it will be variable, and we can see the highest watermark where people will not be affected by flooding. Property will not be affected by flooding, and also the people will not also affect the river. And so there are two concepts that are emerged as a result of that. The concept of resilience to flooding. So we have what we call ecological resilience. So the riparian vegetation provides the ecological resilience. But the efforts, the orientation, what we have been doing is what we call engineering resilience. Engineering resilience is building structures to stop flooding, which is it's something infiltrated, because when you do farming like Cherangani area of the old water catchments, then definitely the lower Nzoia will have more siltation, and therefore even if you do more dikes on the Nzoia or the Nyando, in Nyando there is still a lot, and therefore that's where we have the check dams being proposed, like the one at Koru. When you do that check dam, the problem, it will feed in very fast, the way we have had Masinga feeding in. So the solution is ecological resilience, where the river is left with its riparian. So there are various approaches to protection or correcting or mitigating these challenges. The first approach, due to the concept of protection, the first approach is to protect the riparian. This is also seen as a preservation. So preservation or maintenance of intact riparian areas without any other human activity. So I always look at it as a scale with a balance at the mean road, which is balancing the two. On one side is total preservation, which is the natural way of keeping it, like the forests, the natural forest. The other one is total development, where we completely build and even build on top of the riparian. Now, that will not help either, because total preservation, you find people require to draw water from the river, they have to use the riparian. You have people to do recreation, which is not, which will not affect adversely the river. So it's a balance between that scale, those two extremes, and that's what we need. Conservation. Conservation is the determination, is the use, it is the management of the riparian zones without interfering with their physical as well as the ecological existence. If we do that, then the human system, the aquatic system will be sustainable. It is distinct from restoration. Protection is distinct from restoration, because restoration addresses degraded system, like the Nairobi regeneration was trying to restore the degraded systems. So when they are intact, it represents very variable reference site for understanding the goals and efficacy of various restoration approaches and other management. And we have seen the recent restoration of John Mishoke Park, which had been abandoned, which had been degraded. And so it's very useful. So there are so many important genetic materials that can be there, and a lot of literature about protection. So the next concept is the creation. You can create riparian ecosystems on a site where none exists. You have seen people doing landscaping. You can create. One way you have seen is for instance, the Yatta Canal. The Yatta Canal was done in 1958 by prisoners of war. The then British start from Yatta, Kidimani, all the way to Ikombe, 60 kilometers. You have seen how it has transformed the Matu area and other areas. So you can have canals, artificial canals, and then you create riparian area. And then the greenery changes the microclimates and other aspects. So you can establish new reaches of streams, and it's also a common aspect of management. You can create where there are none. Like Northeastern, when you create such corridors, then you start seeing greening, areas starting to change. The other one is reclamation. Traditionally, this has been defined as the process of adapting natural resources to serve functional human purposes. You have seen the countries they have reclaimed. Of course, we can reclaim riparian areas, wetlands, and all that. That's another. So, for example, the recent demolitions of the Nairobi River Basin aimed at reclaiming the grabbed riparian land using demolitions. You saw the UK, you see the various malls, which were South End Mall, to reclaim the riparian. And one of the challenges, like the UK, you will find they had canalized the river to 1.9 meters. Then the policy change in the upper areas, you will find they changed from low density housing to high density. The zone of changes in 206, zone 3, 4, and 5. Then, of course, you increase the coefficient of runoff, then the amount of water reaching UK was too much. And therefore, it became the barrier, it became the dam that would stop the water from flowing downstream at the Kibaragare stream. And so, as a result, in 2007, the mall was washed with water, halfway filled with water. After demolition, then you see better flow. Yeah, so that's where the riparian, because that's where the water plays its games. The water plays within that area. When the water fills the channel, it is able to invade, to submerge the riparian when there are no settlements to be destroyed. You have seen again the settlement along the Tana, where they have been washed away, the recent floods and the various other floods. So building, because there's fertile soils, you build your houses on the riparian, you have consequences. And so the other one is rehabilitation. That is rebuilding or making part of a riparian useful again. After it has, you saw the Nairobi River rehabilitation projects. I mentioned that earlier. There is a lot of mechanical excavation, reconfiguring of eroded banks and all that. So that's rehabilitation effort as a management tool. Mitigation again is another approach. So this is an attempt to alleviate some or all of the detrimental effects or the environmental damage that arise from human actions, mostly used with regard to wetlands. So you can create buffers, tree buffers, to mitigate the speed. Remember, when you have boulders after any heavy rain, boulders will be stopped by trees from entering the river. And so it is a method. If you mitigate by planting, replanting what has been done. Of course, there is also replacement. This is the substitution of native species with maybe foreign ones that can adapt to that area. Of course, they are quite related, these management models, but they are different. It can be engineered through reconstruction or greatly modify the stream. Then enhancement. So you can improve a specific component of riparian areas. You can enhance maybe by having more grass, having more shrubs. You can enhance by having gabions as protective gears. So there's a lot of ways. Even canalization is another. So one of the very interesting approach to mitigating the challenges of riparian encroachment and degradation is the commoning. Commoning as a concept therefore refers to collective management of a common natural resource, mainly by the community. This is where the resource, like a riparian, can be managed communally by the communities that live there for their own purpose. Even our traditional African, even as put in session paper number 10, the socio-emotional responsibility aspects. You find communities protecting their river, protecting their forest, protecting their common resources. You have seen issues of Tiomin, the Kware being protected. So the commoning concept is very important to manage the riparian lands as common resources. These are under the various conditions, various factors, various conditions. And this is what we recommend most, because the top-down approach, where the government department, government agency, or even the multi-agency approach cannot succeed without the participation of all the stakeholders. And so, if a common approach is used for management, then access must be shared and it must be wide. It should not be one or two people in a community. It must be shared and it must be wide. It must be based on a negotiated community approach. Even determination of the riparian zone is always good to show people, to create awareness about the importance of that zone, the significance of that zone, and then you negotiate with the communities through various fora. So it must be negotiated. Then the benefits must be distributed to community and beyond. If the community do not benefit from the benefits, myself observed along the Tana River, some communities are planted mango trees. They get mangoes, juice. they get timber, they get socially, they get their shade, and also environmentally, the roots of those are bound the river, the banks together, the river banks together. On the other side, where there are pastoralists, you find again there's no trees, and then you have brooks. Brooks migrating as far as 13 kilometers away from the main river channel. So it's very beneficial if communities benefit from that. So the protection, as you mentioned earlier, must be community-based. Community members should be the ones to take care. Not, even if there is government agency, they must work with the communities. The youth must be the ones to take care of that. The parents must also support, and then the government agency. As well as the responsibility, ownership must be through the community participation. And therefore, that's the best sustainable management approach. Even if you protect, even if you rehabilitate, even if you reclaim, it will never come back to the original. It takes years and years to have the plants grow back to their original size. So when you exclude the communities, it will lead to what we call the tragedy of the commons. The commons is where everybody dams, everybody harvests, so there's a tendency to overdo it. If you are the cows, I want to put 1,000 cows to ensure I have more than you. But as a result, the grass, which is the resource, ends up being depleted in a short while. And once it is depleted, then you have challenges of animals dying even before the next rain. So it's a balance between nature and human land use. Of course, there's also naturalization, which is an alternative to ecological restoration. So you try to accommodate watershed scale. Of course, I've seen agroforestry, I've seen where you mix the human with their land together with the public demand for such trees, and therefore, again, the community must also benefit. So the next one is the role of the surveyor in the management. So the land surveyor, or the geospatial or geomatic surveyor, surveyors, not only land surveyors, their use or their work is to, like the land surveyors, for instance, is to measure the size, of course, the shapes, the orientations of parcels of land or parts of land, using plane surveying or even geodetic surveying. Other surveyors, including the land economists, also required to do valuation on the same land. And so, when they do that, the activities affect what happens at the riparian. If we measure the river channel well, and we establish the highest points, of course there are methods of determining without proper mapping. There's still use of historical evidence, including the highest, using trees where the highest water has ever reached. The surveyor can take the level there, then use that to get the contour, and then advise the planner, advise others that this one is a riparian area. It is dangerous for land use, it's dangerous for the river. So, since we are concerned about the size shape, we also tasked as surveyors locating and allocating riparian rights. Any allocation must be determined by a surveyor, by a planner, and therefore those rights among neighboring properties can be determined. Remember, the major challenge, there is no institution that requires the excision of the riparian land. And that's one of the challenges. So in carrying out the task of management, the surveyor has the role of identifying the exact location and the exact size of the property. Now, if I go back to what I said earlier, if you indicate my land is 1 acre, and a quarter acre is riparian land, you are telling me my land is 3/4. So when I sell to the next buyer, rather than sell 3/4, I'm selling 1 acre. And then that buyer has lost value for money because he can't develop the 1/4. So when we are identifying, we should know that according to the Constitution, the new Constitution, that's public land, and the boundaries should not be centering of rivers, and boundaries must be the high water mark, and so the practice must not continue as it were from independence. Remember, the issue is the culture. The Mzungu knew how to protect. When you go to London, you find the river not polluted. You go to the Seine River in Paris, you go to Mississippi River. They have not interfered. And therefore the Americans were using the center of the river as the center of the lots, because they are the obligation, they are the responsibility of protecting. But on the contrary, our approach has been, since we're in towns, we no longer want to protect. And therefore the law must be there, the policy must be there to ensure protection. So the other role of the survey is to locate and to ascertain the existence of any rivers or any wetlands, either seasonal or permanent. We saw the Survey Act, the swamps. It's the role of the surveyor to establish the existence of the swamp. But going further, that swamp must be protected with a riparian reserve or land to ensure we don't farm up to the edge of the swamp. We have seen the Odere swamp now is threatened, and the Odere swamp is the major outlets of all the rivers that come from the Aberdares and then form the Nairobi River Basin. So once we allow that to happen, then it will affect even our river system, ecosystem, it will affect our human system. The surveyor are also the people who identify riparian lands that cannot be developed on or used freely. What is the point of having a very steep riparian area and as part of your land? That's public land according to government. And it's high time that just as we do the roads, riparian lands must be isolated from private land, because it does not make sense if, for example, you can't utilize the same land. You have a title, you get collateral with that title, but even the banks, instead of 1 acre, they can only effectively sell 3/4, because the other one is not free for sale or for use. When it's the US, it's not free for use. So at that time, they are isolated. So some of the observations in this short presentation, this overview, there is that riparian land lack of control as a result leading to contestation. There is a serious contestation for riparian land. This is some of the observations from previous works. So this has then some direct impacts on the management of riparian land. So you will find somebody owning land to the center. This center of the river is also it's not specific, it's subjective, because the river keeps on eroding, the river keeps on changing course. Even if the surveyors traditionally have to pick, then it is of no use picking a boundary that cannot be implemented. And yet denying, other than denying others to enjoy the river course through recreation, you also deny the inspectors, you deny the enforcement officers access to the river, because some build walls up to the end of the river. So even walking along as an inspector or for development control becomes a major challenge. Besides, therefore, there is improper determination. We have seen contradictions in laws. We have seen standards that are contradictory. We have seen even the laws themselves are recommending fixed width, yet the river It's not fixed from the source to the end, to its mouth. It is changing. Nairobi River changes as it goes downstream. It becomes the Athi River. The Athi River becomes the Garana, which is so wide. On the other side, we have the Tana, which starts from the Ghana River, from those rivers in Meru County, the Rakanete County, Embu County. Then when they join, the tributaries make a major river. So you cannot come up with one single standard, a fixed standard of that meters. It must vary depending on the use. If the use is for wildlife habitat conservation, even 500 meters, that corridor must be very wide. And this is what they do in America. If you are passing through an urban area that is having a lot of pollution without a sewer system, it cannot be the 6 meters, it cannot be the 30 meters, it must be wider to kind of prevent that. Again, if your interest is to have groundwater sources, you don't want the water to rush into the river and to rush into Indian Ocean. You want to slow down the flow of the river so that some infiltrates into the groundwater system to become now a source of groundwater. Then, of course, another one is inherent lack of GIS applications in the determination. We have argued always we need to georeference, even under the Land Registration Act. The riparian must be georeferenced, so that when you georeference, anybody submitting development applications to various county governments, the first thing is to chart whether or not those coordinates, of course the coordinates must be the ones acceptable to the county government or to Survey of Kenya. So we must ensure the georeferencing is correct. Number two, when we chart the development you are applying for, either subdivision, even if your land was up the center of river, will tell you, no, this is the maximum you can, this is the further limits that you can go. So there's need to develop GIS systems in various county governments to enable checking. I've seen the KWS have done a good job. They have mapped their parks, and when you submit a project, they check it against, maybe it's an elephant corridor. They will tell you can't do that dam there. It will interfere with our elephant movement. So similarly, we need the same use of GIS and other digital cadastre to ensure always the officers that are approving any application, whether planning application, architectural application, they must adhere to the required minimum width. So that's the reason why the decisions have been based on historic and local physical plans. I mentioned you might find a planner applying 3 meters, another one is doing 20 meters. On the same river, same zone, you wonder what criteria then has been used to use different. Therefore, we have multiple applications of lower limits, especially lower limits. Nobody wants to apply the upper limits because they don't want to lose their clients. So the client tells you, Nataka, you must maximize the use of my land. So they will look at the lower limits, which is the Waroma, or even the Agriculture Act, 2 meters, or the Waroma 6 meters. So 20 feet. And then some of the challenges in practice, you find when this riparian is not georeferenced, then they put the gunning bags on their side, then the river shifts to their neighbor. Then every time those inspectors from Waroma come, they find the building is still within the riparian, yet it is just 2 meters from the original river bank. So it's important to avoid those multiple applications, important to ensure one standard. And so in conclusion, there is an inherent lack of proper determination and proper use. If you find informal businesses on the river, instead of plants, then you know that river is a sink for whatever comes out of that. And therefore, people don't care about the water quality for people 50 meters at the Deka, 50 meters at Mwara, 100 kilometers, sorry, at Mwara. They don't care about that, but the issue of water use quality is very important. So the determination should also consider those people, the use of that, especially the industrial use along Ngong Road, Ngong River, and this is the major pollutant, especially the effluent, major pollutant of the Athi River. So as a result, the management has affected their physical extent or the physical wind, in terms of the physical wind. So if you have a smaller wind of riparian, then you have no place to plant the trees, to plant the shrub, to plant the grass that is useful to protect the river. The river is not a drain, a stormwater drain to canalize, to make it concrete. It kills the microorganisms. It destroys the food chain for the aquatic animals, which eventually affects our food chain. Then the longitudinal continuity or a continuum of riparian vegetation. You cannot afford to have intermittent vegetation. You have a place here, there are buildings. You go 2 kilometers, there's nothing. Then you have some shrubs. Then that one is not around. We need a continuum for it to be useful for the river ecosystem. So, advocating for the river ecosystem, arguing the case for river ecosystem is arguing the case for human settlement. This is collective, it's not individual. Individual affects the collective need, the collective well-being, and therefore the need for the riparian. The other issue is the ecological quality or riparianness, as indicated by absence or appropriate vegetation that is associated with riverine. The Newtonian plants and many other plants, there are so many plants that are associated. You plant maize, maize breaks the soil, and when you plant maize, the soil is loose. Then when the slightest rainfall comes, you find the same soil that you are dependent a lot on being washed away to the Tana Delta. And then this is what they use for farming. Then you find your land, you have to put a lot of fertilizer. So it is in vain. Actually, it's all a fallacy. Then the presence of solid wastes, some of the wastes are very, very, very dangerous, especially from industries. Remember, it's our people who are along that river channel. They have no water pipelines, they have no water treatment sites, and therefore use that water as it is. Then the presence of wastewater, you have sewer, you have water from bathrooms, all that ending to the river. So also construction wastes. And then of course when you dump black cotton soil next to the river bank, when it rains, it gets into the river, washed away, and then makes the river shallow. The river bed shallow, and as a result, there is more flooding and more destruction of properties. Therefore, there is an urgent need. In conclusion, there is an urgent need to intervene to ensure proper conservation measures that includes the management, commoning, issues of rehabilitation, issues of restoration. So this is a dire need for the country. Otherwise, without it, then more towns are coming along the river and more are polluting the river. So one time, who knows, we might import water from other countries. The cost of desalinating the ocean water is more expensive than the cost of protecting or rehabilitating our rivers through their riparian areas. So in terms of recommendations, we need to develop every county, every agency must develop proper GIS systems that are linked with a cadastral system that enable protection of areas that are ecologically sensitive, including wetlands, riparian areas, swamps, and all that. Then this will help also in determining and monitoring the extent of interference Some of them are real time. You find any interference, you find the officers stopping before it is too late. So this will end in management and enforcement on the ground. One of the aspects is we always recommend a FESCOM buffer, either a footpath or a road, to be the buffer between the riparian area and the river on one hand and the land use on the other. This helps enforcement, this helps even the community, the commoning. As they walk around, they say, you are the one discharging sewer into the river. You are the one that is cutting the trees from the river. But if it is left at the back, as practiced in this country, the river is left at the back of settlement, and this is where we dump. This is where we dump what we don't need. So the beauty of having even a 2 meter or a 3 meter, if you look at the Meshoke Park, they are afraid to have that. So the other one is negotiating riparian reserve that need to be enforced to ensure proper management framework. So the commoning again, those who dump solid waste will be, the policing must be more of the community than the agencies that are understaffed, that have little capacity. But where we have a zone that is protected, then you find very nice greenery. If you look at the hotel, the Band Hotel, you'll find very nice site for holiday making, for weddings. But you go downstream a bit, Ngara structures, they are dumping into the river instead. So from that point in Ngara, you find the river you can't even go near. But before then of late, I've been studying that river, you find Gredeshwa. Some floods are now discharging into the river. Yet that's a high income area. So again, there's need to develop sewer. The sewer system in Nairobi is only 30% of the entire city. The former 1963 city boundary, 30% only. The water has increased. When you increase water, we know the waste from engineering is 80% that comes out. So there is a lot of waste flowing in our city. So we need, as we increase water, we need to increase also the sewer system. So to mitigate also the effects of flooding, some recommend some aspect of engineering and to protect some properties. But indeed, the reverse should happen instead of engineering solution. But some have used that method. The best thing is to reclaim, to restore the riparian areas. The best way is to relocate those structures rather than restoring them, especially where the flood risks are beyond mitigation. Then there is need, therefore, to have or to formulate a riparian zone management handbook that can be used in urban and as well as rural areas under policy. Now, the handbook and the policy must reflect on various scenarios. Let's say urban areas, we have 3 scenarios. We have, like Nairobi, the already built up area. It's around only, of the 1963 boundary, it's only 40% is built up. The 60% is still vacant. Of course, we have the national park, but the Ruai, those areas are still vacant. So there is, all is not lost, because you protect the 60% using proper policy. Even if it means 60 meters, we protect the riparian lands. Then, of course, the built-up area is not necessary to leave it like that. It's good to come up with a management solution, ensuring every built-up area has a sewer system and a solid waste collection management system. And then, similarly, you can have a negotiated minimum that must be maintained. Whether it's 10 meters above the flanks, whether it's 15 meters, it must be negotiated to ensure the river is never affected. And then the informal settlement, the land approach in urban areas. So the informal settlement is easier to deal with, it's easier to compensate, it's easier to relocate, because what value does it add to them when every now and then they are washed away? So the same buildings that we fail to remove from the river, from the high water mark, are the same that always require help because their houses have been washed away. Occasionally you might have 1 or 2 deaths. So it's important to think about the informal settlement situation. Riparian land is not free land. Riparian land is not idle land. Riparian land is the lifeline of communities even beyond the city and beyond some areas. The other approach is the rural areas. We have areas that are agricultural, farming. Those ones are very dangerous. They should not farm up to the end of the rivers, whether they are small rivers, because that's the basis of the soil being carried away into the rivers. They have destroyed the dams, the 7 dams along the Tana. So that one requires a policy for the rural agricultural land. Of course, there is also livestock farming. There is the keeping of livestock. There is the grazing of some communities graze. It's not as bad as farming, but again, when animals go to drink water, you find the river banks being eroded. As a result of rainfall, then it becomes more eroded. And so as a result of that, it's good to have solutions including cattle traps next to rivers, including sanitation blocks to make sure people can wash their clothes there. They can take bath, those who don't have proper bathrooms at home. So the policy cannot be a general policy, just the way we have a general practice of riparian. It must be differentiated based on urban and based on rural, and even urban based on the 3 criteria. So we need that policy very urgently if we are to protect any further damage of the river. The next one is erection of concrete pillars. For it to look like it is owned by someone, there must be an extent. The high water mark must be defined through concrete pillars. There we see canal pillars. So it's recommended, especially in urban areas like Nairobi. What is the point of demolishing buildings, structures, and then sooner or later after we forget about that, they are back there because they don't know there is the limits. Those who do encroachment of the canal, they know there is a limit, so they make sure they have temporary structures. So it's recommended we have concrete pillars. They are not expensive. This career profession, ISK, can advocate for consultancies. If we can concrete the road from Nairobi to Busia, why not do just 10 kilometers in Nairobi, protect the Nairobi River, the Ngong River, to ensure industries are not encroaching. After you mark with the post, it becomes source of awareness of the locals that if you go beyond there, it will be demolished. So, yeah. Then the pillars should not just be concrete pillars, they should be georeferenced using GIS mapping techniques. So every pillar you give its coordinates, and therefore any surveyor that does survey beyond there, he knows I've gone beyond. Any planner, he has especially UTM system, they know they are going beyond. So thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. I would like you to share your comments to this live stream, live chats. And this is just an overview. There's a lot of works that have been done on this area. There's a lot of policies that I've not been able to share with you today. In Thailand, they have their own policies, their own standards. There's the UK, you find up to 50 meters. In America, United States Department of Agriculture and others have done a lot of research work, and they have come up with various standards for pollution control, standards for for maybe wildlife habitat standards, for maybe protecting the river from erosion. So probably in another discussion, because this is just an overview, we may be able to discuss briefly, especially in an open forum where questions can be raised. Otherwise, thank you very much again, members, for listening and sharing. And please send your comment to ISK, and I'll be ready to answer them where possible. Thank you very much.
Introducing the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya live stream and live chat. Do you have a question from any of the following areas? Land survey, valuation, building survey, land administration, engineering survey, estate agency, property management, and geospatial information management. Join the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya live stream and live chat every Friday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.